My brother was my hero. He taught me to ride a bike, read me stories in a blanket fort, and promised he would always protect me. But after our parents died, everything changed. In our family home, surrounded by memories, he looked me in the eyes and said, "There is no place for you here anymore." Those words destroyed me. I left and never looked back. 10 years later, my phone rang in the middle of the night. It was him, and what he told me made me realize I had to go back. Ava, that's my name. It's a good name, I think. My mother told me she picked it because it meant life or bird-like. She wanted me to be free, she said, to fly. It's funny how things turn out, because for the last 10 years, I've felt anything but free. For the last 10 years, I've felt like a bird with a broken wing, trapped in a cage I built for myself, all because I was trying to fly back to a place that was never my home anymore. My story starts, as most stories do, with a family. My family. The picture-perfect American family, at least on the surface. We lived in a beautiful white colonial house in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio. The lawn was always mowed, the flowers were always blooming, and the porch swing was always waiting. There was my dad, Robert, a tall man with a quiet smile and a perpetual smell of sawdust from his woodworking hobby in the garage. He was the steady one, the anchor. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. He had this way of making you feel safe just by being in the same room. And my mom, Carol. She was the sunshine, all warmth and light, with a laugh that could fill the whole house. She was a librarian and filled our home with books and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. Every surface had a stack of books. Every corner had a story waiting to be read. She believed that books could take you anywhere, and she was right. They took me everywhere. But in the end, no book could prepare me for where life would take me. And then there was my brother, Mark. He was 4 years older than me, and to my young eyes, he hung the moon. He was my hero, my protector, my partner in every childhood adventure. He taught me how to ride a bike, even when I scraped my knees and cried. He'd pick me up, dust me off, and say, "Come on, Ava, you can do it. I won't let go until you're ready." He let me tag along with him and his friends, even when I was just a pest. They'd be building something in the backyard, and I'd be right there, trying to help. And he'd just smile and hand me a small hammer and tell me I was in charge of the important nails. He'd draw me pictures and tell me stories he made up. Stories where I was a brave princess and he was the dragon-slaying knight. But the twist was always that the dragon was really just a lonely creature who needed a friend. And I would be the one to see that, to show kindness when everyone else saw a monster. We were a team, the two of us against the world. I have this memory, burned so bright in my mind. I was 6, he was 10. We had built a giant fort in the living room out of blankets and chairs. It was raining outside, a heavy, drumming rain that made the world feel cozy and small. We were inside our fort with a flashlight, and he was reading me a comic book, doing all the voices for the superheroes. His voice would go deep and growly for the villain, then high and squeaky for the sidekick. I was laughing so hard my stomach hurt. My mom brought us a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies and 2 glasses of milk. She had to duck to get into the fort. She smiled at us, this huge, loving smile, and said, "My 2 favorite people in the whole world in their own little world." My dad peeked in over the top of the blanket, his glasses fogged up from the warmth, and he just laughed. In that moment, I was complete. I was whole. I was loved in a way that felt absolute and permanent. That fort, that rainy day, that was my home. That feeling, that wholeness, lasted for a good, long while. We grew up, had our arguments, the usual brother-sister stuff. He'd tease me about my clothes, I'd mess up his room. He'd hide my favorite doll, and I'd put frogs in his bed. But the foundation was always there. We were Ava and Mark. Mark and Ava. You couldn't have one without the other. When I had a bad dream, I'd crawl into his room and he'd grumble, but he'd always make room for me. When he was stressed about a test, I'd make him a peanut butter sandwich and leave it on his desk with a note that said, "You're the smartest. Love your annoying sister." It was simple. It was real. The first crack appeared when I was 16. I met Liam. He was a senior, a year older than me, with a crooked smile and an easy laugh. He played guitar in a band, and he had this way of looking at me like I was the only person in a crowded room. It was intoxicating. It was my first real love, the kind that feels like a fever that consumes you completely. I pulled away from my family, from my friends. My whole world narrowed to Liam. I'd skip family dinners to be with him. I'd lock myself in my room for hours, just talking to him on the phone, tracing the pattern on my bedspread with my finger while his voice hummed in my ear. My mom would knock on my door, a worried look on her face, asking if I wanted to watch a movie with them. I'd always say no. I'd hear them downstairs, laughing at something on TV, and I'd feel a tiny pang, but then Liam would say something sweet, and the pang would disappear. Mark was away at college by then, so he didn't see the slow drift. When he'd come home for breaks, I was different. Distant. My head was always somewhere else. He tried to connect. He'd ask about my music, my classes. I'd give him one-word answers before my phone would buzz, and I'd be gone, texting Liam. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the hurt. He was losing his little sister to some guy he didn't even know. One time, he cornered me in the kitchen. "Ava, who is this kid? You're never around anymore." I rolled my eyes. "He's not a kid, Mark. He's my boyfriend. You wouldn't understand." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I understand more than you think. Just be careful. Don't lose yourself." But in my selfish, teenage mind, he just didn't understand. He was old and boring. What did he know about love? Liam became my everything. And like a lot of first loves that burn that hot, it ended in a spectacular, fiery crash. He broke up with me 3 weeks before prom for a girl from the private school across town. Her name was Tiffany, and she had perfect hair and a perfect smile and a father who owned a car dealership. I was a mess. My heart was shattered into a million pieces. The world I had built for myself, the one that was just Ava and Liam, collapsed. And when I looked up, desperate for the comfort of my old world, of my family, I realized I had burned all the bridges. I had pushed them away so completely that I didn't know how to find my way back. I remember coming home that day, my face blotchy from crying. My mom was in the kitchen, humming while she stirred something on the stove. She took one look at me, turned off the burner, opened her arms, and just held me. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't say "I told you so." She just held me while I sobbed into her shoulder, soaking her shirt. She held me for a long, long time. That was the thing about my mom. She was always there, her arms wide open, waiting for me to come back. And I did. Slowly, painfully, I crawled back into the fold. It was awkward at first. There were long silences. I felt like a stranger in my own home. But my mom's love was a patient, forgiving thing. She'd leave books on my bed, books about strong women who survived hard things. My dad, in his quiet way, started leaving little bowls of my favorite ice cream in the freezer, with a spoon right next to them. And slowly, the walls I had built started to crumble. I graduated high school and decided to stay local for college, to be near them. I think, deep down, I was scared to be too far from the safety net again. I went to Ohio State, lived in a dorm, but I came home most weekends. My relationship with my mom deepened into a true friendship. We'd go for walks, talk about books, about life. She told me about her own first love, a boy named Tommy who broke her heart, and how she thought she'd never recover. And then she met my dad, and she realized that some things fall apart so better things can fall together. My dad and I would work on little projects in his garage. He taught me how to use a lathe, and I made him a terribly lopsided wooden bowl that he proudly displayed on his workbench. He'd look at it and say, "Best bowl I ever saw. It's got character." I knew he meant it. Mark had graduated and moved to Chicago for a job in finance. He was doing well. He'd come home for holidays and things were okay. But there was a distance there that hadn't been there before. We were polite, we were friendly, but the old magic, the easy connection from the Fort days, was gone. I always felt like he was judging me a little for my college major in English literature, for my aimless part-time jobs. He was all about goals and trajectories. He'd talk about his 400 and 1,000 and his bonus structure, and my eyes would glaze over. I was just living, trying to figure it out. One Thanksgiving, he asked me, "So, what's the plan after graduation?" I shrugged. "I don't know, maybe travel, maybe write a book." He gave me a tight smile. "That's nice, Ava. But you might want to think about something more practical." I felt that old anger flicker, but I pushed it down. He didn't get it. He never would. Then, the bottom fell out of my world. It was the fall of my senior year of college. My mom called me one Tuesday morning. Her voice was different, thin and reedy. She told me she had some news. She said not to worry, but she wanted me to come home for the weekend. I knew, even before she said the words, that it was something terrible. My hands were shaking as I packed a bag. I drove home in a daze, the miles blurring past. When I got home, they sat me down in the living room. My dad's face was gray. My mom held my hand, her own hand trembling. She had pancreatic cancer. It was advanced. They had found it too late. I remember the room spinning. I remember my dad's voice, low and steady, telling me the details, but I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was a rushing sound in my ears, like a river flooding its banks. The next 6 months were a blur of hospitals, hushed voices, and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I moved back home. I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. I took a leave of absence from school. My only job was to be with my mom, to hold her hand, to read to her, to brush her thin, brittle hair. We read her favorite books together, the ones she had read to me as a child. We'd laugh at the funny parts and she'd drift off to sleep, and I'd just watch her breathe, terrified that each breath might be her last. My dad was a ghost, moving through the house, his eyes always red-rimmed. He tried to be strong, but I'd find him sometimes, just staring out the window in his garage, the lathe silent. I'd go out and stand next to him, and we wouldn't say anything. We'd just stand there together in our grief. Mark came home as often as he could. He'd fly in for a long weekend every few weeks. But he couldn't stay. His job, his life, was in Chicago. I began to resent him for it. He'd arrive and my mom's face would light up, and for a few hours she'd have more energy. He'd sit with her, talking about his job, his apartment, his life. He'd show her pictures on his phone of the city, of his friends. And then he'd leave, and her light would dim a little more. He got to escape. He got to go back to his normal life. I was stuck in the slow, agonizing reality of watching my mother disappear. One night after he left, I sat with her and she said weakly, "Don't be angry with your brother, Ava. He deals with things differently. He runs. It doesn't mean he loves us any less." I just nodded, but inside, the anger was a hard knot I couldn't untie. One night near the end, I was sitting with her. The hospice nurse had just left. My mom was sleeping, her breathing shallow and raspy. I was holding her hand, just stroking her papery thin skin. I could feel each bone, each fragile tendon. She was so small now, so fragile. The door opened and Mark came in. He'd just arrived from the airport. He stood in the doorway, looking at her, his face a mask of pain. He walked over and stood on the other side of the bed. He reached out and took her other hand. We stood like that, on either side of her, connected by her. For a moment, the distance between us vanished. We were just her kids, heartbroken and scared. He looked at me over her, his eyes full of tears, and he mouthed, "I'm sorry." I just nodded. I was too tired to be angry anymore. In that moment, I forgave him. I forgave him for everything. And I think he knew it. My mom died 3 days later. She went peacefully in her sleep, with my dad holding one hand and me holding the other. There was a moment, just before she went, where her eyes fluttered open and she looked right at me. She smiled, this tiny, beautiful smile, and then she was gone. It was the most heartbreaking and most peaceful thing I have ever witnessed. Mark was on a plane, somewhere over Pennsylvania, trying to get to her in time. He didn't make it. I know it's not rational, but in my grief, a part of me blamed him for that, too, for not being there, for choosing his job over the last moments with our mother. It was an unfair, cruel thought, born of a pain so deep it had nowhere else to go. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and sad faces and wilted flower arrangements. People kept bringing casseroles, as if food could fill the void. My dad was a shell of the man he used to be. He moved through the motions, shaking hands, accepting hugs, but his eyes were empty. Mark stayed for a week after the funeral. We were both adrift in the same house, two strangers sharing a grief. We tried to talk, but it always ended in a fight or in a silence so heavy it was suffocating. We were both drowning, and instead of saving each other, we were just pushing each other further under. One night, we tried to go through old photo albums. We started laughing at a picture of Mark with a terrible haircut, and then somehow the laughing turned to crying, and then the crying turned to yelling about something stupid, and we ended up in different rooms, alone again. Then he went back to Chicago. He said he had to get back to work. He said he couldn't take any more time off. I watched him pack his bag, a cold fury building in my chest. He was leaving me. Again. He was leaving me to deal with my dad, to deal with the house, to deal with the monumental task of sorting through a lifetime of our mother's things. He was leaving me alone with the ghost. "You're just going to go?" I asked him, my voice hard. He was zipping up his suitcase. He stopped, his back to me. "I have to, Ava, my life is there." "Your life is here," I yelled, the words ripping out of me. "Your family is here. Mom just died, Dad is a wreck, I'm a wreck, and you're just leaving." He turned around. His face was tired, his eyes shadowed. "What do you want me to do, Ava? Quit my job? Move back into my childhood bedroom? What good would that do anyone?" "It would do me good," I screamed, the tears finally coming. "It would mean you care. It would mean I'm not alone in this." He just shook his head slowly. "You're not alone. You have Dad." "Dad's not here either," I whispered, the truth of it hitting me like a punch to the gut. "He's gone too. He's here physically, but his mind is wherever she is. He talks to her, Mark. I hear him at night, talking to her in their room. I'm the only one left in the real world." He picked up his suitcase. He walked over to me. For a second, I thought he was going to hug me. I wanted him to. I needed him to. I needed my big brother to hold me and tell me it was going to be okay. But he just put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and said, "You'll be okay, Ava. You're strong, stronger than me." And then he was gone. The front door clicked shut, and the silence of the house roared in my ears. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, waiting for him to come back. He didn't. The next year was the hardest of my life. I didn't go back to school. I couldn't. I got a job at a local coffee shop just to have something to do, somewhere to go. The routine helped. The smell of coffee, the chatter of customers, it was a small anchor in a world that felt unmoored. I took care of my dad as best I could. I cooked meals he barely touched. I did the laundry. I paid the bills. I made sure he took his pills. And slowly, piece by heartbreaking piece, I sorted through my mother's things. Her clothes, her books, her jewelry, the little notes she used to leave in my lunchbox. I found a box of letters my dad had written her when they were dating. I read a few, then put them away. They were too private, too precious. I found the lopsided wooden bowl I made for my dad, tucked away on her bedside table. She had been keeping it there. She had been keeping it close. That broke me. I sat on her bed and cried for an hour, holding that stupid, lopsided bowl. I tried to call Mark a few times. The conversations were stilted, painful. We had nothing left to say to each other. The bridge was not just burned, it had been dynamited. He'd ask about Dad, I'd give him a report. He'd tell me about his life in Chicago. It all sounded so foreign, so shallow. He was dating a woman named Chloe. He got a promotion. He bought a new car. It was like he was living in a completely different movie, one I couldn't even bear to watch the trailer for. After one call, I hung up and thought, who is this person? That's not my brother. My brother was the boy in the fort. This man was a stranger. My dad lasted another 18 months after Mom died. The doctors said it was heart failure. I knew it was heartbreak. He just gave up. He missed her so much that his body finally just stopped. I was the one who found him, sitting in his chair in the garage, his lathe still, his eyes closed. He had a peaceful look on his face. I like to think that in his last moment he saw her, waiting for him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked over, knelt down beside him, and put my head on his knee. I stayed like that for a long time. Then I called the ambulance. Then I called Mark. I told him, my voice numb. He said he'd be on the next flight. He came for the funeral. It was a smaller, quieter affair than my mother's. Most of my dad's friends had already passed. Mark and I stood side by side at the grave, not touching, not speaking. The priest said some words. I didn't hear them. I was watching the coffin being lowered into the ground, and all I could think was, now I'm really alone. After it was over, we went back to the house. The house. The beautiful white colonial that now felt like a mausoleum, filled with the ghosts of our happy family. We sat in the living room, in the same spots we always had. I was on the small sofa, he was in Dad's old armchair. The silence was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, a sound I'd never noticed before. Finally, he spoke. "What are you going to do now?" With the house, I looked around. I saw the spot where the Christmas tree always went. I saw the mark on the wall where I'd accidentally thrown a ball and chipped the paint. I saw the window seat where I used to curl up and read. I don't know, I haven't thought about it. "You can't stay here forever, Ava," he said, his voice gentle but firm. It was the first gentle thing he'd said to me in years. "It's not good for you." "It's my home," I said, my voice small. "It's the only home I have." He was quiet for a long time, looking at his hands. He was twisting his wedding ring. He'd married Chloe 6 months ago. I hadn't gone to the wedding. I'd sent a gift, a nice vase from their registry with a card that just said, "Congratulations, love, Ava." He'd called to thank me, and the call lasted 3 minutes. "We need to talk about it. The house, the estate, we need to sell it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Sell it?" I whispered. "We can't sell it. This is Mom and Dad's house. This is our house." "It's a building, Ava. A very expensive, very empty building. It's too much for one person. We need the money from the sale to split the estate." "I don't want the money," I cried, standing up. My voice was shaking. "I want my home. I want my family." He stood up too, his own voice rising. "There is no family left, Ava, don't you get it? It's just you and me, and we can't live in a museum. We can't live in the past. Mom and Dad are gone. This house is just a reminder of that. It's time to let go." That was it. That was the spark that ignited the final, devastating fire. We started yelling. We screamed about everything. About Mom's death, about him not being there, about him leaving me alone, about Dad, about the house, about the past 10 years of silence and resentment. I called him a coward. He called me a child. I told him he didn't care. He told me I was living in a fantasy world. I brought up the wedding I didn't go to. He brought up the fact that I never even tried to visit him in Chicago. The fight moved from the living room to the kitchen, the very room where my mother used to hold me. The air was thick with our pain, our grief, our anger. It was ugly. It was the ugliest moment of my life. And then he said it. The words that would shatter the last remaining piece of my heart. He was standing by the kitchen table, his face red, his hands shaking. I had just screamed something at him, I don't even remember what. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a cold, hard anger I had never seen before. He was silent for a moment, the tension so thick you could choke on it. Then, in a voice that was quiet and terrifyingly calm, he said, "You need to accept reality, Ava. This is not your home anymore. There is no place for you in our parents' home. It's just a house, and soon it will be sold. There is no place for you in our parents' home." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and lethal. They weren't just about the house. They were about everything. He was telling me that I didn't belong. That the family I was clinging to, the family I had spent the last 2 years trying to preserve, was gone. And in his eyes, I wasn't a part of whatever was left. He had moved on. He had a new life, a new wife, a new home. I was just a ghost, haunting a place that no longer existed. I was an afterthought, a problem to be solved. I stopped breathing. The anger drained out of me, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. I stared at him, this stranger with my brother's face. I didn't see my childhood hero. I didn't see the boy who read me comic books in a blanket fort. I didn't see the boy who taught me to ride a bike, who let me be his annoying little sister. I saw a man who had just taken the last, frayed thread of my hope and snapped it in two. I didn't cry. I was too empty for tears. I just looked at him, and in that look, I said goodbye. I said goodbye to the brother I loved, to the family we were, to the girl I used to be. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I went up the stairs, my legs heavy as lead. Each step felt like I was wading through cement. I went into my old room. It was still the same. My mom had never changed it. My books were still on the shelves. My old posters were on the wall. My bed was made with the quilt my grandmother had made. It was a time capsule of a girl who no longer existed. I sat on the edge of my bed and I listened. I listened to the silence of the house. I listened for my mom's laugh. I listened for my dad's saw in the garage. I listened for the ghost of my brother's voice, telling me a story. There was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the sound of my own ragged breathing. And then I heard the front door open and close. I heard his car start and drive away. He didn't come to find me. He didn't say goodbye. He just left. He was right. In the most brutal, cruel way, he was right. This wasn't my home. It hadn't been my home for a long time. Home wasn't a place. It was a feeling. It was the feeling of my mom's arms around me. It was the sound of my dad's laugh. It was my brother's voice in a blanket fort. And that feeling had died with my mom, and then with my dad, and now, finally, with my brother's words. I was a stranger in the only place I had ever felt safe. I was truly, completely alone. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe 2. The sun went down. The room got dark. I just sat there, staring at the wall. At some point, I lay down on my bed, curled into a ball, and pulled my old quilt over me. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, hollow. The next few weeks were a blur of painful necessity. I contacted a real estate agent. I started the process of clearing out the house. It was a lonely, heartbreaking task. I packed away my parents' lives into boxes. Their clothes, their books, their knickknacks. I gave away their clothes to charity. I sold some of the furniture. I kept a few things for myself. My mom's favorite necklace, a simple silver chain with a small pendant. My dad's favorite chisel, the one he'd had for as long as I could remember. The lopsided wooden bowl I made for him, and the blanket from our fort. It was old and frayed, a faded plaid, but I couldn't let it go. It smelled faintly of dust, and if I closed my eyes and pretended, of chocolate chip cookies. Mark and I communicated only through lawyers and emails. Cold, clinical words about the sale, about the money. He didn't ask how I was. I didn't tell him. It was like we were business partners winding down a failed company, not siblings who had once been each other's whole world. The house sold quickly, to a young family with 2 little kids. I saw them looking at it one day from across the street. The little boy was chasing the little girl around the front yard. They were laughing. The little girl tripped and fell, and the little boy ran back and helped her up, brushing off her knees. It hurt to watch, but it also felt right. A home should be filled with laughter, not ghosts. The day of the closing, I put the last box in my car. My beat-up old Honda Civic, packed to the brim with the remnants of my life. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house one last time. The white paint was still bright. The flowers my mom had planted were still blooming, cared for by the real estate company. The porch swing swayed gently in the breeze. I didn't see the house. I saw a rainy day and a blanket fort and my mom's smile. I saw my dad's fogged-up glasses. I saw my brother's face, young and full of love, reading me a story. I saw my family. And then I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, it was just a house. A beautiful, empty house. I got in my car and I drove away. I didn't look back. I got in my car and I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. I had to get away from Columbus, from Ohio, from the memories. I drove for hours until the sun started to set. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. I drove through small towns and past farmland. I found myself in a small town in Kentucky, nestled in the hills. It was pretty, quiet. The main street was lined with old brick buildings and independent shops. I stopped at a little diner and got a cup of coffee. I sat there, watching the people come and go. Normal people, living their normal lives. A waitress called me, "Hun," and asked if I wanted a menu. I felt like an alien, like I had landed on another planet. I found a cheap motel and stayed there for a few days. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just existing. I'd sleep late, get coffee at the diner, walk around the town, go back to the motel, and watch TV I didn't see. Then, I saw a "for rent" sign on a small apartment above a bookstore on the main street. The bookstore was called the Reader's Nook. It had a creaky wooden floor and a cat sleeping in the window. It was tiny, just one room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom, but it was cheap and it was above a bookstore. It felt like a sign. My mom would have loved it. I rented it. That was 10 years ago. I'm still here. I got a job at the bookstore downstairs. I'm the manager now. I spend my days surrounded by books, by stories. I help people find the perfect read. I recommend my mother's favorite authors to anyone who will listen. In a way, I feel close to her here. When I'm shelving books, I can almost hear her voice, telling me about a new author she discovered. The cat, a ginger tabby named Pages, sleeps on the counter, and I talk to him like he's my coworker. The regular customers know me. They call me Ava, the book lady. It's a good life. A small life. A safe life. I never went back to Ohio. I never saw Mark again. The money from the house sits in a bank account. I've never touched it. I don't know why. Maybe it feels like blood money. Maybe it's the last tangible link to a life that is over. I use some of it to buy this old blanket, a new storage box. That's it. I pay my rent with my salary. I live simply. I don't need much. For a long time, I was angry, so angry, at Mark, at the world, at myself. The anger was a hot coal in my chest that I carried everywhere. It fueled me, but it also burned me. I built my own little life here, a safe, quiet life. I have friends, good friends. people I have dinner with, people I go for hikes with. There's Sarah, who runs the bakery next door. There's Tom, the retired teacher who comes in every Tuesday for a new mystery novel. We have potlucks and watch movies together. But I never let anyone get too close. I never let anyone into the deepest, most broken part of me. The part that still hears my brother's voice, telling me I don't belong. The part that still misses the fort I've dated. I've had a few relationships, but they always fizzle out. I think people sense that a part of me is locked away and they can't find the key. I've thought about him, of course. I've Googled him. He's doing well. He married Chloe. They have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy is named Robert after our dad. The girl is named Caroline after our mom. Seeing that almost broke me all over again. They live in a big house in a suburb of Chicago. He's a vice president of something now. He looks happy in the photos. His smile is the same. It's my brother's smile. It's the smile he used to give me before everything. Seeing it on a stranger's face, on a computer screen, is the strangest pain. It's a phantom limb ache for a family that no longer exists. I've seen pictures of Chloe. She's pretty, with kind eyes. I've seen pictures of the kids. They look like him. They look like us. I wonder if they know about me. I wonder if he ever tells them about the aunt they've never met. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder. I wonder what would have happened if I had handled things differently. If I hadn't been so wrapped up in Liam. If I had been a better sister when Mark was away. If I hadn't let the grief turn me into someone so bitter. If, at the funeral, I had just hugged him instead of screaming at him. Would he have said those words? Would he have had to? Could we have found a way to be orphans together, instead of enemies apart? I play out different scenarios in my head. I imagine us sitting on the porch swing, talking it out. I imagine him apologizing, me forgiving him. I imagine us being a family again, but it's just a dream. A fantasy, but wondering is a waste of time. It's a loop you can get stuck in forever. The past is a fixed point. You can't change it. You can only carry it. And I've been carrying it for 10 long years. It's a heavy load, but you get used to the weight. You learn to walk with it. You learn to live around it. The phone rang the other night. It was late, past 11. I was in bed, reading, with pages curled up at my feet. I almost didn't answer it. I don't get many calls that late. Most people know I go to bed early. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number with a Chicago area code. My heart did a little skip. Chicago? I stared at it for a long moment, the phone buzzing in my hand. Then, on the 4th ring, I answered. When I picked it up, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in a decade. It was older, deeper, a little raspy. But I knew it instantly. It was the voice that told me stories in a blanket fort. It was the voice that taught me to ride a bike. It was my brother's voice. Ava, he said, just my name. My heart stopped. My hands started to shake. I sat up in bed, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles were white. Pages lifted his head and meowed, annoyed at the movement. I couldn't speak. The word was stuck in my throat. Ava, it's Mark. Please, please don't hang up. His voice was thick, like he'd been crying. I had never heard my brother cry, not when he scraped his knee as a kid, not at our parents' funerals. He always held it in. He was the strong one. Hearing that catch in his voice broke something loose in me. I still couldn't speak. 1,000 emotions were crashing over me like a tidal wave. Shock, fear, anger, and underneath it all, a tiny, flickering hope that I thought I had killed long ago. I know you probably hate me, he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush, like he was afraid I'd hang up if he stopped. And you have every right to. What I said to you that day, Ava, I have regretted it every single day for the last 10 years. It was the cruelest, most terrible thing I have ever said to anyone. I was angry and sad and broken, and I took it out on you. I blamed you for things you had no control over. I was a coward. I ran away, and I left you to deal with everything, and then I tried to justify it by trying to destroy the one thing you had left, the idea of home. A tear slipped down my cheek, then another. I was crying silently for the first time in a long time. The tears were hot on my cold skin. I wiped them away with the back of my hand, but they kept coming. I'm sick, Ava, he said, his voice breaking on the last word. My breath caught in my throat. All the anger, all the old hurt was suddenly pushed aside by a new, terrifying fear. The room felt cold. It's cancer, like Mom. They found it a few months ago. I've been doing the treatments, but it's not working the way they hoped. It's spread. I finally found my voice. It was a croak, barely a whisper. Mark, I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me, he rushed on. I'm not telling you this to guilt you into anything. I'm telling you this because I can't die with this between us. I can't. Chloe, she knows about you. She knows everything I told her. She's the one who made me call. She said, Mark, if you don't call your sister, you will regret it for whatever time you have left. And she's right. She's always right. He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him trying to steady his breathing on the other end of the line. I could picture him, sitting somewhere, holding the phone, his face red and tear-streaked. I could picture Chloe next to him, holding his hand. Ava, I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am asking, I'm begging you to let me see you. Just once. I need to see my little sister. I need to tell you this to your face. I need you to know that the boy who loved you, the boy in that fort, he never really went away. He just got lost. He got so lost. And I need to find my way back, even if it's just for a moment before the end. The line was silent. I could hear him breathing, waiting. My own breaths were coming in ragged gasps. I was crying harder now, great heaving sobs that I couldn't control. Pages got up and walked over to me, butting his head against my hand. I looked around my tiny, quiet apartment, my safe, lonely life, the bookshelves, the small kitchen table, the single chair, the old, frayed blanket folded neatly on the shelf, and I thought about the fort. I thought about the rain drumming on the roof. I thought about the flashlight and the comic book. I thought about my mom's smile as she ducked into the fort with cookies. I thought about my dad's fogged-up glasses. I thought about my brother's voice doing all the voices. I thought about home. Maybe home wasn't just a feeling. Maybe it was a person. And maybe, just maybe, the person I had lost was trying to find his way back to me. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I wiped my face with the blanket. I looked at the old, frayed blanket, the one from the fort, the one I had carried with me for 10 years. It was a symbol of everything I had lost. But maybe it could also be a symbol of something I could find again. Where are you, Mark? I whispered. My voice was small, like a little girl's. He let out a breath, a sound of such profound relief that it made me cry harder. I'm at home, Ava, in Chicago. Chloe and the kids are here. We're all here. He paused. I'm not sure how much longer I can travel. The doctors, they say maybe a few months, but I'll come to you. I'll get on a plane tomorrow. Just tell me where you are. I looked around my apartment again. This little room that had been my sanctuary and my prison for 10 years. No, I said. The word surprised me. No, Mark, I'll come to you. Another pause. Ava, are you sure? I'm sure, I said. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since I left Ohio. I felt purpose. I felt like I was doing the right thing. I'll drive. It's not that far. I'll leave in the morning. We were both quiet for a moment. The silence was different now. It wasn't heavy with anger or grief. It was filled with something else, something fragile and tentative but real. Ava, he said, his voice soft. I'm so sorry for everything, for all of it. I know, Mark, I said. I know. We said goodbye and I hung up the phone. I sat there in the dark for a long time, holding the blanket. Pages purred beside me. I thought about the road ahead. I thought about my brother. I thought about the little boy and girl I had never met, my nephew and niece, named for our parents. I thought about Chloe, the woman who had made him call. I thought about the fort, and I thought about forgiveness. It wasn't a switch you could flip. It was a path, a long, winding, difficult path, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to start walking. The next morning, I packed a small bag. I put the old blanket in the car. I told Sarah at the bakery I'd be gone for a while. She gave me a big hug and said she'd keep an eye on Pages. I fed the cat, gave him extra scratches, and told him to be good. Then I got in my car and I started driving. North, towards Chicago, towards my brother, towards the past, and maybe, just maybe, towards the future. The drive was long. It gave me time to think. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The good, the bad, the ugly. I thought about Liam and how that first heartbreak had sent me running back to my family. I thought about my mom's arms around me and how safe they felt. I thought about my dad's quiet presence and how much I missed it. I thought about the years of silence with Mark, the chasm that had grown between us, a chasm I thought could never be crossed. And I thought about his words, the ones that had shattered me. There is no place for you in our parents' home. I had let those words define me for 10 years. I had let them convince me that I was alone, that I didn't belong anywhere. But as I drove, I realized something. He was wrong, not about the house. He was right about the house. It was just a building. But he was wrong about me. My place wasn't in a house. It wasn't in the past. My place was wherever I chose to be. And right now, I was choosing to be on this road, driving towards my brother. The Chicago skyline appeared on the horizon, a jagged line of glass and steel against the blue sky. My heart hammered in my chest. I followed the GPS to a quiet suburb with tree-lined streets and big, beautiful houses. I pulled up in front of a large brick home with a well-manicured lawn. There was a swing set in the backyard, a minivan in the driveway. It was so different from our white colonial in Ohio. It was Mark's life, his new life. And I was about to step into it. I sat in the car for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I was scared, more scared than I had been in a long time. What if it was awkward? What if we had nothing to say to each other? What if the anger and the hurt were still there, buried beneath the surface? What if he was different? What if I was different? What if we were just two strangers who happened to share some DNA? Then I looked in the back seat. The old blanket was there, folded neatly. I reached back and grabbed it. I held it in my lap. I closed my eyes and I thought of the fort. I thought of my 6-year-old self, safe and loved. And I thought of my brother, the 10-year-old boy with the flashlight, making me laugh. That boy was in there somewhere. And I had to believe that the woman I had become, the woman who had built a quiet life in a small town, could find him. I got out of the car. I walked up the path to the front door. I rang the bell. I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. It was Chloe. She was even prettier in person, with kind, worried eyes. She smiled, a tentative, hopeful smile. "Ava," she said, "I'm so glad you're here." She opened the door wider. "Come in, he's in the living room, he's been waiting all morning." I stepped inside. The house was warm and inviting. There were pictures on the walls. I saw Mark and Chloe on their wedding day. I saw the kids, Robert and Caroline, at various ages. I saw a picture of our parents, one I had never seen before. They were young, laughing, sitting on the porch swing of the old house. My breath caught. Chloe put a gentle hand on my arm. "He wanted that there. He looks at it every day." She led me to the living room, and there he was. He was sitting in a large armchair by the window, a blanket over his legs. He was thin, so much thinner than I remembered. His face was gaunt, his skin pale. His hair was thin, a casualty of the treatments, but his eyes were the same. They were my brother's eyes. And when he saw me, they filled with tears. He tried to stand, but I crossed the room in 3 quick steps and knelt down in front of him. I didn't know what to say. All the words I had rehearsed in the car were gone, so I just took his hand. It was so thin, so fragile. I held it tight. "Ava," he whispered. His voice broke. "My little sister." And then I was crying, and he was crying, and I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around him. I held him as carefully as I could, aware of how frail he was. He held me back, his arms weak but desperate. We stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other. The old blanket was on the floor beside us, forgotten. "I'm so sorry, Ava," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving you, for what I said. I was so wrong, so wrong." "SHHH," I said, stroking his back. "It's okay, it's okay." It wasn't okay, not really. The years of hurt, the loneliness, the anger, they didn't just disappear. But in that moment, they didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was holding my brother, that we were together. We pulled apart eventually, both of us wiping our eyes. Chloe had quietly slipped away, giving us privacy. Mark looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in 10 years. "You look good, Ava, you look peaceful." I laughed, a wet, shaky laugh. "I don't feel very peaceful right now." I picked up the old blanket from the floor. "I brought you something." He looked at it, confused for a moment, then his eyes widened. "Is that—" "The fort blanket," I said. "I've had it all these years. I don't know why, I couldn't let it go." He reached out and touched it, his fingers tracing the faded plaid. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "The fort," he whispered. I remember everything, Ava, the rain. The cookies, Mom's smile, I remember being your hero." I took his hand again. "You still are, Mark, you always will be." We talked for hours. We talked about everything. About Mom and Dad, about our childhood, about the years we lost. He told me about meeting Chloe, about falling in love, about the kids. He showed me pictures. He told me about his diagnosis, the fear, the treatments, the hope that slowly faded. I told him about my life in Kentucky, about the bookstore, about Pages the cat, about Sarah and Tom. I told him about the loneliness, the safe little life I had built, and how his phone call had shattered it in the best possible way. Later, the kids came home from school. Robert was 8, with Mark's eyes. Caroline was 6, with a smile that reminded me so much of our mom it made my heart ache. They were shy at first, but then Mark introduced me. "This is your Aunt Ava," he said. "My sister, she's come a long way to see us." Caroline looked at me with big, curious eyes. "Do you like books?" she asked. I laughed. "I love books. I work in a bookstore." Her face lit up. "Me too. I mean, I don't work there, but I love them. Daddy reads to me every night." I looked at Mark, and he smiled. "It's our thing," he said. That night, after Chloe put the kids to bed, the 3 of us sat in the living room. Mark was tired, his energy fading, but he didn't want to go to sleep. He wanted to be with us. Chloe brought out cookies she had baked, and we ate them and talked some more. It felt so normal, so like a family. Later, when Mark had finally fallen asleep in his chair, Chloe walked me to the guest room. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. "It means the world to him, to all of us." I hugged her. "Thank you for making him call," I said. "Thank you for being the reason I got my brother back." I slept better that night than I had in years. I stayed for 2 weeks. Every day was a gift. I read to the kids. I helped Chloe around the house. I sat with Mark and we talked, or we didn't talk, just being together was enough. I saw him have good days and bad days. I saw the toll the sickness was taking on him. But I also saw his strength, his humor, his love for his family. I saw the man he had become, the man I had missed for 10 years, and I grieved for all that lost time. On my last night there, we sat together, just the 2 of us. The kids were asleep. Chloe was reading in the other room. Mark was in his chair, I was on the sofa, the old blanket draped over my lap. "Ava," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I need to ask you something." "Anything," I said. "Can you forgive me, truly forgive me, for everything?" His eyes were pleading. I looked at him, my brother, the boy in the fort, the man who had broken my heart and then tried to mend it. I thought about the last 10 years, the pain, the loneliness, the anger, and I thought about the last 2 weeks. The laughter, the connection, the love, the anger didn't seem so important anymore. It was just an old wound, finally starting to heal. I got up and went to him. I knelt down beside his chair, the same way I had the day I arrived. I took his hand. "Mark, I forgive you. I forgave you the moment I heard your voice on the phone. I just didn't know it yet." He closed his eyes, and a tear slipped out. "Thank you, Ava, thank you." He opened his eyes and looked at me. "There's always a place for you, you know, in my home, with my family. You're not just my sister. You're my family. You're my home." I leaned up and kissed his forehead. "I know that now." Mark passed away 3 months later. I was there, holding his hand, just like I had held our mother's hand. Chloe was on the other side. The kids were asleep upstairs. It was peaceful. He went quietly, a small smile on his face. I like to think that in his last moment, he saw Mom and Dad waiting for him. I stayed in Chicago for a while after, helping Chloe with the kids with the arrangements. It was hard, but it was also good. I was part of a family again. Robert and Caroline called me Aunt Ava. They asked me to read them stories at night, just like their dad used to. I told them about the fort, about the rainy day, about the cookies. They loved it. They asked me to tell it again and again. Eventually, I went back to Kentucky, back to my little apartment above the bookstore, back to Pages and Sarah and Tom, but I wasn't the same person who had left. I was different. I was lighter. The weight I had been carrying for 10 years was gone. I still had the old blanket. It sits on a shelf in my apartment in its storage box. But now, when I look at it, I don't just see loss. I see the fort. I see my brother's face. I see my mom's smile. I see my dad's fogged-up glasses. I see my family. And I know that home isn't a place. It's not even a person. It's the love you carry in your heart, and my heart is full. I talk to Chloe and the kids every week. We video chat. I send them books for their birthdays. Last summer, they came to visit me. We went for hikes in the hills. We went to the bookstore. I let Pages sit in Caroline's lap. Robert asked me to teach him how to use a lathe, and I remembered my dad, and I smiled. I'm not very good, I warned him, but I can teach you what I know. We made a lopsided wooden bowl together. I have it on my kitchen table now. It's got character. My name is Ava, it means life. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I'm finally living.